Thank you, Jamie, and I'm so pleased to be here to give our perspective on this important topic. I want to focus on three things. Why this is an important topic for Merck. Why is the environment especially fragile right now for R&D into areas around AMR, and what are some of the potential solutions to these challenges? So why is this important to Merck? Well, it was about 80 years ago that Merck launched its first antibiotic. And since that time, we have been engaged from a preventative as well as a therapeutic perspective in this fight. And most recently, within the last several years, just launched a couple of new antibiotics targeting gram-negative resistant pathogens. And I think interestingly, with the discussion earlier today, launched a novel antitoxin targeting C. difficile. And I think we can get to this later in the discussion, but that actually exemplifies what some of the issues in terms of the economic challenges facing R&D in this space. So how do we address the challenges of creating an environment that sustains investment in development of antibiotics, vaccines targeting this area, and alternative technologies? We know that there are significant scientific challenges. We're a company that, with one of several companies that tried and failed to develop Staph aureus vaccines, so we know that there are significant scientific challenges here. There are regulatory challenges. A lot of those have been addressed, but some remain and are part of the reason that we have a significant economic challenge. But I want to focus briefly on what some of those economic challenges and solutions might be. There's been a high level of recognition at very high level, so G20, G7, UN have identified that a need for new incentives is really important to stimulating ongoing investment in this area. But at the same time, the only action that governments have really taken to date to address the incentive situation is by creating or by moving forward grant funding for push incentives, like through BARDA, through GHIT Fund in Japan, or through IMI. Governments to date have not taken steps on the pull side to really create the economic environment that would create sustainable investment from the private sector. And we know that even with these push incentives, that only gets you so far. And we have the example of several companies that have left the space even after receiving that push funding from BARDA, for instance. So what do we need? We need a suite of incentives that covers the landscape from early stage R&D through to bringing the product to market and keeping the product on the market and accessible. So this calls for a range of incentives that addresses the particular challenges at each stage. And I think one of the key challenges is when we come to the reimbursement of these products that relates back to the question of regulatory approval. Most antibiotics will come to market with a non-inferiority trial to a generic standard of care comparator. And what is the importance of that? Well, in many of our health technology assessment processes in Europe, if you are non-inferior to a generic comparator, the price that you're actually able to get from the payer is that generic price. And so that creates a large challenge that needs to be addressed. A lot of the products that we're looking to bring to market are also trying to target really important resistant pathogens that are treated in hospitals. And many times within hospitals, we're faced with diagnostic-related group bundled payment systems where the hospitals are actually incented to use the least expensive product, even if a more expensive, newer product would be most appropriate for patients. And so we're faced with, we need to look at reimbursement reform to address the issues of allowing access to novel antibiotics when they're most important for patient access. We need continued early stage push incentives, but we also need incentives that address the fundamental challenge that is unique to antibiotics, which is we don't necessarily want to use them early in their life cycle. We're not exactly sure when they should be used early in their life cycle because we don't necessarily have the resistance data, we don't necessarily have the resistance testing, and so we need payment systems or novel incentives that allow for a return on investment to the manufacturer early in the life cycle of the product that is not necessarily linked to the actual use of the product. So these are novel incentive models that I'm sure that others on the panel will talk about. But what's critically important is that we need to, and this panel, hopefully, in this National Academies session, will help to spur the importance of this, because we hear off and on that maybe the market isn't challenged here. Maybe we don't need maybe we don't need governments to act, but we can see, someone earlier said, that sometimes we just need to look at observational data. And the observational data here is telling us that companies are leaving this therapeutic space and the number of drugs that are coming to market are fewer and fewer. So we need to act urgently here.